We have got a crisis of attendance. People are voting with their feet. You've got 160,000 children absent from school, severely absent from school. Schools have become factories for universities, which have become factories for nowhere in lots of ways. And I know it's probably a bit blunt, but you can see now the creaking in the university sector. There's this question over what is school for.
Welcome to the Policy Fix. I'm Steve Rigby, Chief Exec of Rigby Group, one of the UK's leading private businesses. I'm here today with the amazing Andy Cook, Chief Exec of the Centre for Social Justice. His organisation leads some of the really important issues in the UK, setting and recommending policy. He comes from the charitable sector and, importantly, has straddled both sides of politics, where the Centre for Social Justice was founded by Ian Duncan Smith, but now works closely with Labour as well. I'm here today to talk to Andy about some of the key issues that we've debated together around disadvantaged children, around absenteeism for schools, around the need for philanthropy as part of the solution for the UK's challenges. On to today's episode. Andy, welcome to the Policy Fix.
It's great to be here.
Just give us a little bit of background, if you could, Andy, about you and the organisation. We've had the pleasure of working together for a couple of years now, and you do some amazing work, but I guess many people won't know you. So give us a little bit of flavour of who you are and perhaps a bit about the Centre for Social Justice.
Sure. Well, it's brilliant to be here, and I absolutely love working with people like yourself to try and get them mission over of changing lives, and that's what the CSJ is about. It's a think tank that was set up about 20 years ago now to look at the bottom 20% of society, those most struggling, and think about how you can do some policy fixes and changes across the country to help them fulfil their potential.
I like the plug there.
Yes, hello. Yeah, it's straight on. Any good website will have us. I got into it because I don't come from Westminster or policy or politics. I come from Leeds, where none of those things go on there. And I founded a charity because my kind of life had fallen apart a bit. I moved into the Midlands, and we founded a charity there to try and help a load of kids that were living on the estate that I was living, try and find jobs and futures. And so I founded and grew a charity that worked with kids who'd been kicked out of school, those that were unemployed, and got them into jobs and helped them find their futures. And I got to know the CSJ because every year they do an awards programme for the best 5 or 6 social entrepreneurs across the country, and I was fortunate enough to win one. And
so that's coming up in, I think, 2 weeks' time.
That's coming up, and it's the best
Just give us
night.
a little bit of background there.
I am massively biased, but it's the best night of the year, certainly in Westminster, where we celebrate 4 or 5 unsung heroes from across the country who are doing small charity things or different kind of initiatives in localities, and we put them onto a major stage in Westminster where you have secretaries of state, major philanthropists, business people, journalists, and we say there's a great hope in this nation, and it's happening in Hartlepool here, it's happening up in Edinburgh on this project. And these guys often don't get the airtime. Their heads are down doing stuff locally, and we try and put them on that big stage, and we give them a bit of money, we make a film about them, and we say to people, A, there is hope, and B, here's some really good ideas which you could take elsewhere. And this year we've got an all-star lineup. We've got a packed room, we've got people like Gareth Southgate giving out awards, a couple of secretaries of state, to really honour these guys. And I remember it when I was doing mine. I was just in Loughborough running a small charity, ended up going onto this main stage. Josh Lucy, the rugby player, gave me out my award. I was there in a pinstripe suit and a Brut Aquatonic dripping from me in terms of the smells, because I'd never really been to London, and yet they gave us money. There's all these philanthropists around who then got behind us and grew us, and so it's a wonderful night.
So now you're rubbing shoulders with pretty much everybody in government. How do your mates and your family feel about that journey you've been on?
Well, firstly, they think I've lost my accent quite significantly. They think I drink in shandies rather than proper pints and gone all soft. And my mum's coming this year to the awards because it's my 10th year at the CSJ, and I'm proud to have her there. And I think she's proud that we're doing our little bit to try and kind of help people that are like us to fulfil their potential. So, they think I've changed massively and become a soft southerner, but at the same time, I think they're a little bit proud.
Heaven forbid.
Yeah.
So the work you're doing there, what's interesting is that you were founded by Ian Duncan Smith, clearly someone that's been around politics for many years, but clearly a Tory. And we're now under a Labour government. So how's that transition happened?
You've got to plan it tactically. I mean, we've always been, to be fair, we've always said, cross-party think tank, and no one really quite believes you because Ian's our chairman. But we've got lots of different Labour people involved. Carolyn Harris is our vice chair, who's from the Labour Party, and got lots of other people. So you get kind of tactically, you get different people involved so you can learn about what different parties are doing in different ways. But ultimately, I think we're fine because we focus, we're different, and I would say that, again, I'm biased. We focus on a people group, whereas lots of other think tanks focus on a theme or an agenda or a party that they want elected, whereas we're all about the bottom 20%. And do you know what? The poor will always be with us, and we're just trying to make their lives that, not just better structures around them, but them fulfil their potential. So whatever government is in play, we can work with and say these are some of the top ideas for how you really find that talent that's out there, for how you really farm the potential that's out there and release people for all they're meant to be. We were founded under a Labour government, then there was 200 different incarnations of a Tory government, and then we're back to Labour. So it doesn't scare us because there's good people across all the parties that we try and work with.
Yeah. One of the experiences I've had, I'm new to politics in the last 18 months, but I do find a lot of bright people, and I talk to friends and they talk about politicians being stupid. But that's not my experience. My experience is generally quite caring, detailed, thoughtful people, genuinely trying to make a difference. But just give me your perspective on that.
I agree. Yeah, I think, I've only found met a handful of ones that I didn't like, I would say. The rest, I thought there's some that are ambitious and there's some that are kind of worthy, I would say, and then there's some that are really up for doing it. And it's a hard job. It really is a hard job. You get stick from all sides of the equation. And it takes someone who's brave and thoughtful and detailed and doesn't get swung by a moment in politics. And there's certainly a lot of those good people out there. And yet they're sometimes battling with a system that's very, very difficult in how the civil service works and how the politics and how the media work in that way. And I would say overwhelmingly, though, I've met lots of good people.
Yeah. So obviously the think tank world is quite broad. There's lots of different organisations of particular persuasions or policies. But your organisation tries to approach things quite differently. In the work that we've done together, we've done 2 pieces of work together, the last of which is Absenteeism, which hopefully we can come back onto. But in the way that you go about things, you've got a very structured way of doing it. Just talk us through why do you operate in the way that you do, and the approach and how that's relating into deliverable policies in the future.
Yeah, so when Ian set us up 21 years ago now, he did so when he visited an estate, the Easter House estate in Glasgow. And it was kind of written up by the press as the kind of scales fell from his eyes when he was out in a kind of really impoverished estate. The thing that woke him up to our agenda, I think, was that he went into this one really rough estate and the life expectancy was 10, 15 years below the next estate that was 100 yards, 100 metres away. And he started asking the questions, why? And so we were set up on this basis of why is there this other world operating in our world? But actually, what he also saw up there in what was changing things was lots of small charities and community groups and localised business that were around these lives that were lifting them up. And yet they got seldom little airtime. They were solving the problems. They weren't just moaning about them and getting on with it. And so a founding principle of us was that someone is solving these problems somewhere. And you often find those in the localities, in regional areas, in community groups. So we were set up to go and find where the hope is, where there's real life change. And basically, we're the biggest plagiarising organisation going. We go and find the people that are solving it. We bring the ideas back to Westminster and we say, you could do this en masse. We also, I would say, is listen to what the real issues are. Westminster gets taken with certain themes and certain stuff and all the rest. And yet, often those in the real world, on the ground, in localities, will say, no, this is the actual issue. You need to focus more on there. So we try and find what the real issues are and challenge the orthodoxy that often happens in Westminster. And we'll try and find solutions. So anytime we publish a paper in what the problems are, we always come with, here's some ideas for how to solve it, rather than just trying to stir the pot on more negativity.
I think one of the interesting things you do is you try and cost those, you try and put in things that are achievable. I think to get a report that could be adopted, for me, is kind of the ideal report. So why have an aspiration that you know can't be funded? It's just not realistic to do. So that approach that you take, I know not every recommendation gets adopted, but the approach of being pragmatic and just realistic about what can be achieved, I think is one of the strengths that you have as an organisation. As you know, I'm a big advocate for place-based philanthropy. I really believe, I know you do, about thinking about the place, the circumstances that people are in, the challenges that they have, and the solutions that may well be different by each geography. If you're going to Liverpool and it's an environment where their industry moved 20 years ago or 40 years ago, often we find multi-generational unemployment and significant poverty. So looking at those individual circumstances and finding how you can make a difference is really key. Just give us your thoughts on where you see place-based philanthropy going in the future.
Where I see it going is I hope it goes 2 feet, it goes harder and fuller and more. That's where I hope it does, and I think it will. We meet with lots of kind of successful people who've come to London, frankly, and have made fortunes and doing great stuff, and then have looked back up the road and seen the place from which they came and thought, what the hell has gone on there? And so you're seeing this happen a bit more and saying, right, and they're instantly thinking, how do I get some of this capital, ideas, energy back? As a slight side point, that's often where one of my problems with the social mobility agenda is. I love the idea of people being mobile and social, but often it has meant get out of that crap town where you were and go to London, which I am a product of, frankly, although Leeds is not crap, it's the best city going. But you see that in how it ushers through our areas versus, and now I think people that have done stuff are saying, oh, how can we kind of recreate our areas? In terms of philanthropy, 84% of giving in this country goes to 4% of the charities, which is a staggering stat when you think about it. And that's just the charity sector in that way, which is basically saying there's these big beasts of big infrastructure charities that gobble up, that are very good at marketing, very good at showing themselves off, but frankly haven't often been in local areas. And I think people are getting a bit wise to that and wanting connectors to help them find some really good frontline stuff that's high impact, that's locally committed and part of the ecosystem. I think there's already a move happening, and you see it in our politics, frankly. You see it in the devolution agenda, you see it in those, even though Whitehall's kicking against it in lots of different ways. I think there's a natural movement to that way for the reasons I've said, people looking back down their street thinking, what's happened there? Well, I've been down here. I think there's a natural, it's happening politically. I think in order for it to happen fully, though, we need an infrastructure for the small guys. We need, frankly, people like yourselves that are driving it in your area to bring people around coffee tables and dinner tables and say, look at this good stuff. And then I think we need some agendas. People do come out the woodwork when they're focused on a thing. Part of the reason of when the academies movement that was done under Gove, whatever you think of that whole movement.
Lots of great things under Gove, yeah.
But one of the great things I think in the school thing is it drew out business leaders into the education field, into getting involved in it. Why? Because it had a thing to get involved in. If you've ever looked at the on-site youth centre movement, it's doing the same thing. It's pulling together these amazing on-site youth centres that are cropping up in different areas, but they're getting council, they're getting business leaders, they're getting the local mosque and church leaders to sit round a table around a theme and put money in and put energy and their brains in and not just their wallets. And I think so you need some themes and some stuff to go after, some ideas that will change the area. And I think we could see a real step change.
Yeah, one of the things that we've experienced in our philanthropic journey is that we've been bringing ideas to the combined authority and local authority, and broadly everyone they've accepted, and that doesn't feel right in hindsight. So I'm very pleased for me, but in reality what should be happening is the agenda should be set by the combined authority or local authority. They should come out with a need, and then philanthropists and third sector get involved in that need. So that sort of transitional shift that there is this alternative form of capital and provision available in the regions, I think something that government needs not to deliver, but they need to own the agenda and set centrally the art of the possible. And I know in the West Mids, in our region, what we've achieved together is really fantastic. It's going to be really quite life-changing for small numbers of thousands of people rather than hundreds of thousands, but nevertheless it's a start. So just give me your take on that. How we engender more place-based activity?
But that I wouldn't necessarily agree that it has to come from council and the direction. I think it comes from innovative people that want to drive change. You've gone there yourself and said, right, let me learn about this area. You had kind of space capacity to be able to do that. And often these places like councils don't. They're fighting fires left, right and centre. Whereas people coming back in or from the area, having with kind of clear eyes, having a look, can really lead in that way and people bring people together. So I think there's some exciting stuff happening in that way where things like mayoral partnerships. We've been doing a lot of looking at Andy Burnham's work in Manchester, where he's really bringing people together, whether it be on the Housing First agenda, which is this whole new way to tackle homelessness, which has brought different people together, or more recently this thing called the MBAC, the Manchester Baccalaureate, which has brought businesses around an issue that they've seen that every area is facing on technical education for young people right now. Andy, in his area, has everyone, that's a commonality of an issue, like I was saying, a focus on a thing. Let's get businesses, let's get schools in, and they're all around that. How do we solve that? Now, they've jiggled the education system together to work it, and I think that's what's exciting. Key people going after agendas like that.
I think the whole UTC agenda, the technical college agenda that Andy Burnham's got, super interesting, and people like Jesse Norman doing sort of much shortened degrees, again, interesting. And these challenging things, these test cases about how we change and evolve the educational system, I think are really important. We just recently had the curriculum review come out, and I think Becky Francis has tried hard in the confines of what she had available to look at that agenda, but I don't see a seismic shift. I see a marginal evolution. I think the last time it happened was under Gove, so it's nearly 15 years since we had a curriculum review. But in an environment where AI is about to change the agenda for all of us in a completely rapid succession of moves that are going to happen in the next few years, this sort of once in every 15 years, once in a generation shift feels wrong. We've got to look at iterative changes.
Yeah, I agree. I think what we're undergoing at this moment in time is asking ourselves, what is education for? I mean, that sounds perhaps a bit deep, but there's been a change into the social contract over the last few years, particularly driven by COVID, I would say. And so I agree with you on Becky's review of that she worked within the confines where she was. But why are those confines so tight? Why can we not have bold conversations again? Because you look at the education system, and frankly, and the work that we've done with you, Steve, which we've absolutely loved doing on the attendance crisis, we have got a crisis of attendance. People are voting with their feet. You've got 160,000 children absent from school, severely absent from school, over 50% of the time. You've got 30% of parents no longer seeing full-time school as absolutely necessary. There's this question over what is school for, and yet we all, I mean, as parents, it's a blooming nightmare that isn't just seen as this thing where they should be going all the time. And so I think we have got a moment where people are saying, what's this for? The building of AI, or the kind of coming of AI in that way, I'd absolutely throw square into there. The employment crisis we've got, or inactivity crisis going on. People aren't linking going to school with getting jobs anymore. And then questions over the kind of validity of the university sector in some ways. I would be well up for, as I think many others, and certainly parents, let's look at what we're doing in education again. Let's look at how we're using sport and AI and ask the bigger questions rather than just tiptoeing all the time along on this journey.
So I guess the question is, why haven't we done that? So this is probably the last review now for a decade. But that opportunity, every school leader I teach to, and by the way, as I'm sure you meet, I find head teachers inspirational people, truly inspirational. People I'd have in my business running organisations. They're leaders of people, they plan ahead, they're running a £7 to £10 million organisation. They're dealing with lots of bureaucracy, both locally and nationally. Truly amazing people. But against that background of those people that are really screaming, saying we need difference, we need change, we need enrichment, we need flexibility, we need to adapt to perhaps a societal mix of people that might be in the school, why against that sort of very loud voice that you and I hear every time we visit these organisations, why haven't we made a bigger change?
I don't know. Maybe people get stuck in their ways. We all like to kick and moan a bit, but actually it takes real leadership to go through. We blame the systems when actually it's people that change and make systems themselves. A bit of boldness to step up and go for it. I think, and that's why I think there is a moment now. We're talking about the curriculum review, in that that Becky did and was given a certain yardage on it. I just think we're not politically brave anymore, and we're too busy looking at what focus groups are thinking about rather than trying to change what those focus groups may say in the first place. And I think we're wanting some boldness in that sense in our political leaders, and I think they'd get backing if they went for it a bit more.
Yeah, I'd agree. You touched on absenteeism, which, for us personally is an important issue. We both had some personal experience in this journey through COVID with our children. And the work we did was really clear. It kind of highlighted that rather than just penalising parents, we need to support parents. And I think there has been a breakdown between what parents expect of schools. And certainly yesterday, in fact, I met with 30 head teachers and a round table called Heads Together, something we're doing in the West Midlands. And in that situation, one of the key issues about why teachers are leaving is the way that parents talk to them and the breakdown in relationship between how parents communicate with respect or not, as the case may be, and also their expectations that, we used to have a social compact where you were expected to go to school. That's now broken down. Our work we did together showed 1.5 million children absent from school, 1 in every 10 days, which is startling. That's Leeds, Liverpool and Manchester city centres together. It's a staggering number, I think 17% of young people. So the work you've done is really great. You've given about 25 different recommendations. How do we start to get that moved into an environment where we can get some policy change?
I think we stay at it. I think they are coming around to it. I remember when this first started, we did a big paper called the Ghost Children thing, and people had a pop at us for calling them ghost children. Oh, they're real people, and I think you know the point we're trying to make. That was 6 years ago when the pandemic was going on, maybe shorter time. And at that point, it was flatly refused to even be looked at by the government at the time. And over time, that kind of built. And those numbers then were 60,000, 70,000 in severe absence. If we were having this conversation 4 months ago, it was at 145,000. This is getting worse. But at the same time, we know that the Secretary of State, Bridget Phillipson, has now got this as a key part of her strategy. These things take frustratingly long amount of time, but it's on there, it's in the offing, they're looking for ideas. Tragically, I think at the moment the civil servants are looking at numbers in terms of how you get the persistent absence down, because that then stops the more severe absence. But I think they're wrong. I think, i.e., if you can stop all the low-level kind of truancy, for an old kind of school's word, you'll stop the longer term. But I think they're different issues, totally different issues, and I don't think they've clocked onto that yet. We stay on it. That's the point. We've got to give them some practical options now, of which they're taking some of them on. Things like the school attendance staff, and they've piloted that in Middlesbrough. We got them to do 15 million to try and work that. Get basically like kind of Pied Pipers getting out there in Middlesbrough, finding the kids that aren't, bringing them back in. I think that will show success, and they'll roll that out a little bit more. But it's a bit like when your car breaks down or it needs jump leads to go. That is just in the moment. We need to do, and that might get the car going, but it doesn't fix the underlying problem. And I think so we will keep pushing on those ideas to fix the problem now. But the underlying issue are the things we've talked about: parental engagement with schools, the curriculum, the use of sport and enrichment, the use of AI in schools. How do we make this efficient? I think that's the type of thing groups like us, people like you, businesses and other leaders can do together to set a bigger, longer-term agenda. So you've got to go at both speeds, I would say.
Yeah, I think the social compact between actually government and society is really at risk right now. The expectation of the public on what they receive is extraordinary. We've got 54% of households net beneficiaries of benefits or benefits in kind. We've gone over the 50-50 balance. Surprise, surprise, we have a fiscal deficit. We're not reforming services. We're just looking to tax more. So we're in a position where there's got to be more responsibility placed on the public, I think, to do their job, have their children at school, be ready to go to primary school. I think 64% of children are arriving at primary school ready to go to primary school, and that's climbing steps, going to the bathroom, eating with a knife and fork. These are not educational requirements. These are basic requirements, but 1/3 of children arrive today in our schools unable to do that. And it can't be the state's responsibility at all times to deliver those things.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's, 1 in 4 or might be 1 in 5 that aren't toilet trained now turning up at school. I mean, this is ludicrous. What are we doing to ourselves in this way? And yet we've got to work with these families in seeing. It's the same in the welfare state now. It's 5,000 people a day signing off work, sick. This is a tragedy. This is a kind of human tragedy of what's going on in society at the moment. And we've got to change it. And that is the social compact, the social contract that's going on. We need to look at what brings people alive. What is the responsibility? How can we help people in that way? One of the suggestions that we did in our paper together was things like the equivalent of a speed awareness course with parents in schools to actually help them in their parenting. I'm a parent, I haven't got a clue what I'm doing most of the time. And yet there's institutions that can help us all. And, there's some great friends of ours, Ed Venker, who runs the school. I remember him doing his school was in a really deprived area. He put on parental classes, and loads of people say, you can't, it's a middle class thing trying to teach people. It was oversubscribed because people want to learn and people want to listen. So I totally agree that there's massive responsibility that isn't being shared in lives from parents to schools, and everyone's expecting the schools to do more. A kid only spends, 15-80% of its time there. But at the same time, we've got to help people, not just shame them. And I think we can do that. I think
Ed's a good example. He's someone that's running a school. He does many other things now, but runs a school which is from nursery through to 18, which is quite rare. He calls that cradle to career. Many other people use that phrase for different reasons, but he's running this environment where he wants to see the child right almost from day one through to when they leave and go to further education or into employment. And in that environment, despite the fact he's near Heathrow and it's very, very poor around there, lots of low-skilled, low-paid jobs, he's got 50 applications per child to go to a school. And everyone sees they want that break, they want that opportunity. And he's living in the same financial terms as everybody else. He gets the same amount of pupil premium or same settlement per primary school or secondary school student. Yet he's delivering this unique service, and he's doing that through leadership. And I think a lot of this comes down to creating the leaders of the future in our societies. And I know you feel strongly about this.
100%. But does that not show us it can be done? There is people like Ed's all around this country, and it's about finding them and facilitating them to do it. And I do think the education system in this way has kind of squeezed out innovation in a sense over the life. It's boring. This is Ed's point. It's boring. You go to the educational meetings and all this, and I get that you've got to do line after line. But remember, this should be a vibrant setup, and I think you can get the kind of leaders to lead in such a way, in that way, and bring quality out. And heads, and I agree, are absolutely outstanding people, but they're spending lots of their time in terms of kind of balancing the books in this way and looking at the kind of components in that sense. And can we refine the kind of imagination and innovation in things like education that allows people like Ed to go and kind of find talent rather than manage problems?
What's amazing to me is when I meet people in the charitable sector that really stand out, they're all ex-Teach First. So they've all been teachers, they've come into the sector, and they're trying to do really quite different things. And, things like Teach First as a charitable organisation, we've got these outstanding capabilities around the country. I kind of don't feel the government harnesses that or even sometimes believes that they play an integral part in society. Again, I signed up to a correspondence you did around where we go in philanthropy. I mean, just give us your views of where philanthropy sits, where the third sector sits alongside local and central government.
Nowhere near close enough. Philanthropy is where innovation can take place. Teach First is a belting example, and there's more. They tried it in prison offices, and that's a key issue of the moment. But there's philanthropy enables that kind of innovation, and yet the kind of squeamishness of government to work with it, because it's about control and risk mitigation, which I get in lots of ways, means that it hasn't partnered as well. Like I said, I think the last one where they really did engage with communities and philanthropists and business leaders was the Academy's movement, a government-led thing that drew out. The paper, again, that we did together shows that if the match funding that comes from this, and not just the wallets, but the brains that you can get in and the local networks, etc., by engaging. I think if government set out a few key stalls where on key issue areas that it wanted to go after and try to draw out philanthropists, it would get it. We are trying to do a big one at the moment on youth centres. We've been trying for years on this one.
Which has been crippled in the last decade.
It's been crippled, and we've looked at on-site, but also community groups in this way. And I remember when Sajid Javid was Chancellor, we got this close to doing a major match fund where we raised a load of private capital through an amazing guy called John Roberts at AO, and government would put in. Where it all fell down is government wanting control over the whole pot versus sharing some of that power, if you like. Now, again, I know I've been in that many meetings with civil servants, and number 10 saying we can't possibly be seen as partnering with a kind of philanthropist or company in that way. If it just tried that a few times, I think the results would be incredible. And the youth centre side could be a major test bed for that.
Yes, so on-site youth zones is a really good example. So I think they have about 25 around the country. They're really expensive to put together. They're £7 or £8 million to build. But importantly, you can't build a building and then not operate it. But what they do is get philanthropists in to try and raise the capital and provide some ongoing funding, but allow it to become self-sustainable. That's a really good example of that public-private partnership. And if we could get more of those facilities, I'm sure we'd have less youth crime, less youth unemployment. We're really missing those in our society today.
Totally. And what I'm interested in there is absolutely, and there's other models to one side, though we're big fans of it. But it's the model of coming together with the public-private partnership, and the youth club thing offers a good test bed for that right here and right now. And as you say, the on-sides, 7 million pop to build, they cost 1.5 mil to run. But if you've got philanthropists bringing their network in, getting religious about what they're doing in their local area, the network grows in that way. And so it's taken the heat off government having to raise it all. And frankly, I know on the youth centre thing, the reason it's done is because it's the last on the list of a local authority who, by the way, don't often know how to run them in the first place. And yet you could hand this over as real experts in the field, still having a massive stake from a local government or national. And you could do this on lots of other areas in the community.
So I do see some brave decision making out there. We've just been involved in something with Birmingham and Walsall councils, trying to look at wards, and wards are about 10,000 people on average, about 3,000 children. In that, there'll be a few primaries and a couple of secondary schools. And in that, they're trying to, rather than put what we call interventions, as you know, which is a terrible word, but trying to help the community, rather than tell the community what they want, you ask the community themselves to dictate that agenda and drive through grassroots charities the interventions or the help that they need, is a better word. Give me your take around that approach, because I know that resonates with what you're doing with your awards.
I'll ask you, what were the top things that this in Walsall? What were the locals saying that we want? It's a bit like, I often find this, you go to charities and say, what do you really want will make a difference? They always say money. And of course, everyone wants that. Yeah. But what would the locals say is there?
So on the list typically is things like reading age attainment. So right. How do we get children to be in a position to start school at secondary school or earlier in primary with a higher level of reading ability? And if you can't read, and obviously we've got, in the Midlands, it's 52% ethnicity in Birmingham. And often English isn't the first language. But if you can't read, how do you follow a lesson? And if you fall behind just 6 months, then probably the rest of your school career is wasted. So reading age attainment's important. Children into care. So how do we support those families that are under duress? That may be through alcohol abuse. It may be through a member of the family having gone through the prison system. It may be through an absentee parent. Any number of things which can set a family on a very difficult course, that were they to be helped rather than told what to do, were their community to come around them and assist them, they may be able to keep those children. And a child going into care is a loss of about £1 million to the state, let alone the life. And the life's the important thing. So the child prospects from that point forward they drop exponentially. So in that situation, helping people avoid that circumstance is another key area. So they will obviously then drive things like, they want more football clubs, or they want more whatever it might be to help the children, or maybe, if helping in drama or those things that do help enrich. But at the high level, it's things like absenteeism, literacy, children into care.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I imagine, I asked that because I imagine that'll be similar in lots of areas, and then there's some of the stuff that they have or haven't got in that locality. And that's what we see. So I am a huge advocate for that, going and listening and saying. But I think there's lots of things that will be the same. The literacy point, and then often places then want facilities as well. And as we said, we've spoken a lot about schools today and a bit about youth clubs. But kids are in school 15-18% of their time. What else are they doing? And more facilities, more places to go, to be together is often the things that we hear from localities.
So you've always got a big agenda. So tell us what's on the horizon for 2026. What's coming up?
Well, we've been doing loads of work on lost boys, which has been quite a major thing. Loads of our small charities were saying no one's talking about what's happening to our boys.
That's because boys are struggling at school more than girls.
Every area now, they're behind. And we got a big splash on it about 8 months ago in terms of the Sunday Times. We published the major report that we'd done. And we kind of got lucky because at the same time, Adolescence, the Netflix thing came out.
Which really helped, didn't it?
Which really helped. And Gareth Southgate then did his speech on it. And since then, it's really blown up as a thing, with loads of mums writing to us saying, thank you for talking about this, because we don't really know how to deal with our boys. So we've done all where all the problems are. Now we're bringing up a series of reports on big ideas about boys. We won't stop on the attendance stuff. We just won't stop on that. As we say, we've got to kind of jumpstart the car now, but then longer-term solutions and what's going on in education. I've rattled on a little bit about sport, but I think this nation does not hold the potential of sport and enrichment in any way, shape or form in the way it could do. particularly for those that are most struggling at times. They only play the way they find their place is in that kind of tennis court at times, and we want to see more of that rolled out. We were working with some interesting brands and people to think about that. And then, of course, inactivity. The amount of
really
lost potential
issue.
in this country.
9 million people.
It's an outrage, actually. And I think this government are really struggling on this issue. And actually, even Charlie Mayfield's report, which came out this week, says, the estimated cost to a person of young people going off work sick now is £1 million to them from if they go at age 22, and it's £1 million to the state. Now they're just the monetary things, but the talent loss. We talked about all the great leaders of institutions, of schools, and all the rest. These are out there in our communities. We've got to help them move into their potential. So we're doing big work on that now. But we're going to be doing even bigger work over the next period because our people need it.
Yeah. One of the things when I talk to employers, they're not really after grades anymore. They're after the things that enrichment build about communication skills, about being inquisitive, about being creative. And I think unless we create that airspace outside of the qualifications, which obviously is the way in which Ofsted rate, and then we are missing a big opportunity about where life is going to go to. Much of the learning will be done by AI. So actually it's about how we adapt to that learning. How do we critically think about the message that's coming back and analyse, is this correct? Is it synthetic as information? That skill that's going to be needed moving forward is going to change. And I'm pleased the government's looked at oracy as part of their curriculum review. But what do you see as the key issues around that we need our young people to do?
Well, I firstly had to look at what the word oracy meant, to be honest, because I didn't quite follow it. But I think totally that we've got to. Also, I've mentioned it previously. The schools have become factories for universities, which have become factories for nowhere in lots of ways. And I know it's probably a bit blunt, but you can see now the creaking in the university sector as well. And I see it in people coming through to ask for jobs at the CSJ. They've often ended up doing a degree and then a master's and then a whatever else because they haven't really known what else to do. I think that starts right at the school age. Our careers thing is called careers, but yet the thing that people want to move into is jobs, and then you get in a job and you start building it. I'm not saying that you can't build a wider, bigger aspiration, but the whole system is actually built towards moving people through academia. Now, that has its place. It absolutely does, and it brings loads of benefits. But can we start to show where some of these exciting opportunities for jobs are and earning your money? Because once you get in a place, like I did at an early age, like loads of my mates, your appetite grows, and the things that you want more, and you want a bit more. You want that better
pair
car,
of jeans or a car,
and there's no shame in that, and in fact, there's a really exciting opportunity in that. But yet, our system hasn't quite caught up with where some of those opportunities will be because of things like AI, and as you say, some of the social skills that you need and all the rest can be really driven by schools and by education.
One of the dangers right now is that the minimum wage is getting to such a point that actually the difference between being educated and not educated is limited. And I think that's minimum wage has been an amazing achievement for the Labour government and carried on through well by the Conservatives in power. And societally, it feels like the right thing. We should be passing the burden of society back to employment rather than necessarily the state. That hasn't happened. And we're now in danger of actually compressing, where graduates start and where people who perhaps have left school with no qualifications start. And that feels to me a real big societal issue that perhaps needs some more work in the coming years.
I think you're right, but I think people will vote with their feet. So it will happen kind of naturally and realise, why am I? And
they'll stop going to university.
They'll stop going to university. I think that people are seeing. But this is where I think schools can start plotting as well to say that this is where you can end up rather than just this one pathway. And if you think about how the careers is done, it's often done by well-meaning teachers who've only ever known one route themselves. Versus, i.e., they've gone through the academic system and come back and taught that way. Can you bring businesses into schools earlier on? We've seen some great groups doing it out there, right from kind of year 7, getting them work experience.
Yeah, I think that's in the new review, isn't it? So a mandated amount of working experience. But it's stated there, but I have never had anyone ask me the question, as a major employer, how am I going to deploy that?
Well,
there seems to be a complete disconnect. There's a complete disconnect between the two. And, one thing government's setting an aspiration, but if work is the place to give that experience, perhaps we should allow things like the Growth and Skills Levy to deploy that So use the resources we're paying for to provide high quality work experience.
Totally. I think, but this is where we're thinking about big ideas rather than just incremental stuff. And I think there's going to be increasingly an appetite for that. And we should do a whole list of different things like that they could take on.
Sounds like maybe a task for next year. So, we're very philanthropic, that well as the Rigby Foundation. So for you coming in and taking your time, we've offered a donation to your favourite charity. Just tell us a bit about that.
Well, I did want it to be the Andy Cook Trust, but you wouldn't allow that. No, there's a wonderful charity that when I founded 2020 in the East Midlands, it's called Love for Life, that we ended up taking under our umbrella, and it works with young girls in a lot of these deprived estates that have had some really tough stuff happen to them. And it's still going strong. There's a wonderful group of girls that are running the charity all across these estates, and it'll be wonderful to give that money to them, and I know they'll be incredibly grateful.
Great. Well, we're proud to support them. Last question. This is called the Policy Fix, so we can't get away without recommending some policies to government from both of us. I'm going to ask you to go first. Give me your top one or two areas that you really think would make a difference. If you were in power, what might you change?
Well, a bit of a technocratic one. I would totally separate in the welfare section right now the mental ill health and physical ill health in that way. I think it would make a huge amount of traction. It would really focus the mind on where people need support in that sense. So I would do that. And then in terms of things that we've been talking about, I would do a massive match fund on youth centres and build that as a really exciting proposition and a big kind of national mission of building them all across the country in that way. And finally, I would absolutely look at our enrichment offer in schools. I would lump up sport. I'd extend the school day, get local charities to run, or local sports groups to run the sport within schools, and go for something bold and big in that way.
Yeah. I think one for me is around growth and skills. So we are about to see some changes, what was called the apprenticeship levy. 50% can now be used not for apprenticeships, and not saying that apprenticeships aren't important, but today, believe it or not, we have less than 50% of apprenticeships going to under 24s, which for me kind of feels crazy. Apprenticeships for older people, for me, feel like a different journey. But at least now there's some change coming. It's not yet been defined. But as we look to define that legislation around growth and skills, allowing employers to do in-life iterative training, especially around areas such as AI, for me feels a really critical journey, because we're about to go through major societal change. No one's ready for it. No one knows the rules. No one knows the timescales. But the only way to start on that journey is to start the journey sooner rather than later, and start getting people to adopt these skills and these technologies and try and find a way to a more enabled role. Otherwise, we could see, some of our middle-aged people really left behind, and that would be, another burden on the 9 million unemployed people that we have.
We might steal that. We're about to do a big commission with Liz Earle on middle kind of age group people and work.
Yeah, no, I think it's obviously we're both very focused on young people, but I worry about those people in their late 40s, early 50s. We need them working until 67 today. I suspect, if we link that to life expectancy, perhaps towards, 70 tomorrow, and if they lose their way at 55, then, we've got a real problem on our hands in the future. Yeah. Andy, thanks as ever for your time.
No, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Great to be with you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, click here to watch the next one.